Outer Orange. Hello, and welcome! It's time for some
Pie chart.
But before that, we gotta talk about some playmats. Missing out on Christmas? Don't know what to get your card game buddy? Maybe your card game buddy could use a new playmat, something like this. You can get this at Zero Damage Gaming. That's right, you heard me, ZeroDamageGaming.com. Use code ORANGE and get yourself a playmat for yourself or your friend or your loved ones. And in case your loved ones aren't that into waifus, do not forget that we also have husbandos. We got husbando right here. But guys, let's talk about the pie chart. So we are here. We had quite a bit of results. We're actually getting towards the end of the BCS season, and it's actually very awesome to see kind of like where things are going now. Let's go ahead and talk about, we had Singapore and we had New York as our main ones. We got standard, V, and premium to go over. I'm so excited to talk about this. I actually really love talking about results, and actually I'm really excited for these results. I think they've been very interesting. So let's go ahead and kind of get started. Let's go ahead and go into Singapore first, just because I don't know. Why not? Why not go to Singapore first? So we have here, this is Fuzzy Paradox, by the way, as per usual. Thank you, Fuzzy, for supplying these. It is crazy to believe that there was a world when there was a time we just didn't have these. But anyway, let's look at this real quick. So we got quite a bit of diversity. We're finally starting to see the Ava results since, you know, the promo finally came back. So we have 2 Ava, 1 Leticia, 1 Gravidia, 1 Prison, 1 Mahar, 1 Vero Magnus, and 1 Greedon. All of these are very, very good decks. The only thing I'm kind of a little surprised to see is not the Greedon actually, but I'm just surprised that a Flagberg didn't make it in. I feel like Flagberg actually has really good matchups into all these decks, except Vero Magnus. I think Vero Magnus is really tough actually, but aside from that, I think Flagberg has really good matchups in all these. It's just very possible that no one really brought Flagberg because it's still not that popular of a deck to bring. Everything else kind of makes sense. Mahar, you know, all these decks have been showing results, whether it's here or in Japan. So this isn't surprising. Leticia finally got pretty much released, so people are playing that. And then the only other lyrical deck that's like pretty relevant at the moment is like Michu. So this all makes sense. Let's see how this converts over. I actually haven't seen all the results yet. I don't even know what the top 4 looks like for Singapore for this specifically. I'm assuming there'll be at least 1 Ava and maybe a Gravidia that makes it in. I don't know about the rest, so we'll see here. So this is the Singapore standard top 4, and Leticia took it all. Very interesting. So Leticia is one of those decks where she's like really strong, but also very her hand early on in the high roll can be kind of a little weird. So it's interesting to see that this deck made it through, and Greedon made it as well, and so did Ava, and then last place was Gravidia. So I was expecting these 2 to make it through. I was actually expecting it to be exactly opposite. I was expecting this to be first, this to be second, this to be third, and this to be fourth, and it was completely flipped on me, crazily enough. But Leticia is a very strong deck. She can stack towards the end, like she can literally start stacking. So she starts stacking her deck early on, and if she doesn't do any on hits, she can actually just keep stacking her deck. So the deck gets very annoying towards the end. It can outgrind pretty well. His hand early on is pretty rough, and they have to high roll into, you know, the restanding win con. But the idea is to not like focus on that. The idea is to actually focus on just the normal game plan of the deck and just kind of like grind through. And that's kind of what the deck does. It also deck filters pretty well, and Bread Girl is just really strong. Greedon has been getting a lot of support recently, so this is not too surprising. I personally have not tested a Greedon since like set 3 or set 4. So I've read the cards, they look really strong, so I have no idea how impactful this deck is now in terms of into meta. I'm assuming it does pretty well. It never really has a board, you know, like decks like these 2 really, it doesn't do anything against those decks. What I mean by that is Ava doesn't have anything to bind. Not that it matters, Ava can still just keep doing her thing, and Gravidia has nothing to retire, which can be kind of hurtful if there's no board to retire. It's like, you're just retiring the meteors for your own crits and power, I guess, which is fine, but it can be kind of rough because you're not getting the crits from the octopus burrito guy and all this kind of stuff. And then Leticia actually, in my opinion, struggles into both of these 2 decks down here, which is why I expected this to be flipped, and seeing that did not happening is actually kind of surprising to me, because Leticia has a hard time early on getting a hand going. They can send cards back to deck and all this kind of stuff, but they kind of struggle in the early game, where I think Gravidia really shines. So that's like where the biggest surprise is, but it kind of depends on who fought who and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, very good stuff. Very happy to see. Congratulations to everybody. Let's go ahead and move into Singapore V Premium, and this is the top 8 chart right here. So we have 5 Year Chronicle, 1 Bermuda, 1 Genesis, 1 Link Joker. You'll notice the Link Joker is a Glendy deck. It is Glendios. Now, something that I've talked about, and I'm sure other people, I hope other people have brought this up, because if you have tested V format at all, you'll actually know that Glendios is one of the best counter picks into Steam Maiden. Maidens. It's always been like that ever since the set has dropped. Whether people have been aware of this or not is kind of its own thing. I've tested personally. I've tested with Simplistic Derp. I've tested with a couple other people. If you don't know the matchup, like if you don't know it, you will easily get railed down by Glendios as long as they don't super hard brick. Like if they brick super hard, you can kind of come back as a Steam Maidens player. However, if you don't know what to do and you don't properly set up, the Glendios matchup is really hard. I'll just tell you guys right now, fill up a board or deny the counterblast early for some of that early locking that they can do. You know, you can wait a couple turns before going super aggro. If you don't make these decisions like right off the top though, like in the very beginning, you're actually just boned, because what happens is that they lock your 2 front rows and you lose the game. So you have to be very careful. Now, something about Glendios though is that it has, in my opinion, it has a kind of tough time to excel. I think Protected Force is sort of where it starts shining the most. But I'm not a Glendios player. I mainly have tested into Glendios, so there might be some more sauce that I don't know. I haven't seen the deck list yet. I know people have been talking about it. And then we have the Fenrir deck as well. So Fenrir made it in. Not too surprising. Fenrir performs pretty well. I don't know if it's the best variant right now. I know it has like some retire, like removal options that it can do. It can kind of force out Steam Maidens to lose as well. It has a way to retire while they're attacking, both through the promo and through Fenrir's skill. So because of that, you kind of have this interesting interaction that slows down Steam Maidens. So maybe there's something there. That's possible. I don't know. I tested that deck for a little bit and I realized my brain just isn't massive enough for it. And then we have Reindeer. If that's actually Reindeer, like Highlander Reindeer, I really want to see what that list is looking like, because I have no idea with the Q-Tire ban and everything. I don't see how this deck could be performing decently well. And nothing against it. Let me see. I don't know if they have a list, but they don't have a list here. Nothing against the deck, but losing Q-Tire is pretty massive for Reindeer. Like, yes, you can like do your thing as a Reindeer player, but not being able to directly search your deck for any piece you need in a deck that's pretty bricky, in my opinion, is pretty rough. Anyway, and then we go into the results, and lo and behold, Glendios won the whole thing. I did know about this one because people were going kind of crazy about it, that, you know, the minute this dropped. I actually want to take a look at the Glendios deck list. I heard some people were bringing up there was another card that they were running, and so let's go ahead and look at that real quick. So if you guys don't know how Glendios works, it plays reverse cards, so you know, you might look at this and be like, well, what's going on? It's not too surprising. So they are running the Chaos Breaker, which makes sense. Some people purposely run Chaos Breaker to deal with Excel meta, by the way, so this is pretty normal. And then of course they're running Glendios himself, so that's pretty normal too. Overall, from what I'm seeing, this list is actually very normal. Everything it does is kind of what it's supposed to do. You have your searching cards, you have Zirconium, which is the card you really want to be careful of if you're playing Steam Maidens. This is the card you want to avoid seeing early. Like if your Link Joker player is facing you, they don't open this card, you're kind of sitting pretty. But notice it calls to an open rearguard circle, so that's what I meant by you can flood your board. And if you flood your board, they actually can't activate the skill anymore. If you just have a full board, just literally a full board, there's only calls to open rearguard circles, so they actually can't do anything with this card. That's one way to go around this card, so it's just something to keep in mind for that kind of future stuff. And then yeah, we have like our searchers and all this kind of stuff. I did notice there's a lot of draws in this deck. There's actually 5 total, which is interesting to me, because this deck actually can deck out not intentionally. They usually try to deck you out because they'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again, but I guess they're running the draws because they really want to make sure they're finding the pieces, because this deck does brick. They're only running 8 grade 2s and what I think like 11 grade 1s, but it's bringing them the grade 2 slot. And also you really want to find these, right? And though Glendios can kind of search for them too, but you really want to find them as quickly as possible. You want to keep riding Glendios himself. Like, you want to keep riding this card to kind of keep applying pressure. Force markers really matter. This kind of also helps set up as well. So these are just things you kind of want to keep doing over and over again. If you don't do them over and over again, you kind of start falling off. So you want to set up as quickly as possible. You want to get your lock going as quickly as possible. And you want to just keep doing you want to shut your opponent out of the game, and you want to just keep doing that until you win, essentially. Premium Singapore. So here's Premium Singapore. This is pretty interesting to see. They got a little diversity going here. A little bit of all the good decks, right? So we got 2 Narukami, 1 Pale Moon, 1 Gear Chronicle, 1 Bermuda Triangle, 1 Dark Irregulars, 1 Spike Brothers, and 1 Grand Blue. All very strong decks, all very good contenders. There's really, at this point, I feel like the meta is kind of like starting to stay the same, is the best way to put it. Like, you bring your best decks, and then you bring your second best decks, and you bring your third best decks, right? So essentially you bring Narukami, you bring Steam Maidens, you bring Highlander, and then everything else after that are all good options that all also have decent fighting into these decks as well. And that's just kind of what we're seeing here. So top 4 looks something like this, which is very interesting. So Steam Maidens did not make it through. Nightmare Dolls took it all, which is also very interesting. It's crazy to me that even through everything, Nightmare Dolls is still showing this much of an impact. We have second place Narukami, third place was Gia. Congratulations. I did see the list, I thought it was really cool. And then fourth place was Zane with NOK. And overall, just really good stuff. I am kind of curious to see where the Nightmare Dolls list is looking like, sort of like if they changed anything, or if it's pretty much almost the same list to how, you know, Nightmare Dolls used to function. Well, I guess we'll see here in a sec if they teched anything in. So they changed there's quite a bit. Actually, this list is very different from a normal one. It's not like insanely different. This isn't like a whoa, this is so different, but this is pretty different. I'm not used to seeing this card at all. This is a very old card. This is the Neferit Beast Tamer, and it says when your other rear guard is placed, retire this unit, call a card from soul to your back row rear. So just another setup card. Kind of weird because you have to call this and then you've retired to call something else, but you get to call anything from soul, which is pretty useful. So it has to be a back row, but you can just happily just call Leslie out if you need like double Leslie. Makes the setup turn for Leslie a little bit easier if you want to go for like a double Leslie spree. Seeing these is very interesting. I think the soul bots can be kind of heavy sometimes depending on what you're trying to do, but that's just me. And then if you high roll with your soul early, it's not too bad, but if you don't, like, your soul can actually run out pretty quickly. So this is when this unit is placed. If you have the other rear guard, you can choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and your opponent puts into soul, and then the other one just straight up draws you a card, which is very useful. The draw, I think, is pretty nice. Setting these up is pretty cool. They are workoroids, so you can search them out. Well, they're workoroids, but I'm sorry, you cannot search them out through Marissa. So you can use them to put them into soul through other skills, like even Carol and stuff like that, because they're workoroids, and you know they count for the workoroid effect. But that's pretty much it. They do not count for this effect, sadly, because she does not search for twos. However, they are 10k bases, which is something I brought up. 10k bases are very, very useful. New York. So here's New York Standard. So we'll go ahead and start with New York Standard. So very similar actually to the Singapore results, but just a little less diverse. So we have 4 Eva, 2 Lucicia, 1 Mahar, and 1 Greedon, which in New York's results, we also had these 4. And the difference is we just had a couple of other stuff too. So this one was a little bit more drilled in on this right here with the Ava. Now, I'm not going to lie with y'all. I am a little surprised to see Ava have this much results. And it's nothing against Ava. I think the deck is good. Top 4, it looks like this. Greedon did not make it in. We got first place with Ava, second place with Bahar, third place with Nicholas, and I'm sorry, with Ava, and then fourth place with Leticia. So Leticia just couldn't make it through here. I guess the struggle was too much. Mahar could have just went grade 4, goodbye. Leticia does have a hand problem early on. Not so much later on, but early on, sometimes you just have the fakest hand on the planet. Like sometimes you're just only holding orders. While some orders protect you, it doesn't change the fact that you're only holding orders. It can be very spooky sometimes. Sometimes discarding is very rough. Whereas Ava doesn't really have this problem as much. The early hand is like usually pretty healthy and all that kind of stuff. And then Mahar, it's just Mahar. You just have to, you know, find a perfect guard of time and hope to outscale them before they rise to grade 4 and kind of start making your life difficult. So yeah, overall results are good. I think all these decks have pretty good matchups into each other. There really isn't anything here that's like super degenerate in my opinion. I know there's for Ava, but I don't think Ava's degenerate. Like there is ways to counter Ava or ways to deal with Ava, but also it's just an overall good deck on her own, meaning she's consistent, she'll keep doing her thing. So you just have to be careful and your guarding and how you want to go around that. Premium. So New York Premium, it is a little bit more heavily stacked on Narukami as we see here, but we are seeing similar decks. The only there's 2 differences here. We see a Mega Colony and we see Genesis, but these 5 right here are very, you know, very old stuff that we just keep seeing over and over again. So we have the 3 Narukami, the 1 Gear Chronicle, the 1 Primitive Triangle, 1 Spikes, 1 Genesis, and 1 Mega Colony. So people might be wondering, well, we haven't seen these in a while. What's going on here? So Mega Colony just got like a new promo, so it's no surprise that it's happening. Also, the person piloting this is just in general like just a huge Bugs player, so anything to just play Bugs, right? So that's what he did here. I'm not too sure about the Genesis here. It's possible that they might have high rolled into a pretty good stride move or whatever, but the Genesis kind of needs to get there, and actually surprised enough, decks like these right here all make it very hard for Genesis to get there. So I don't know how their rounds were, but they made it through. Genesis is very oppressive once it hits that GB3 condition, kind of similar to how Royal Paladins works with Jewel Knights. Like once it kind of gets that GB3 condition, you're kind of screwed, but you have to get there, and there's just a lot of decks that will one-shot you before that happens. So that's like the only reason why Genesis isn't keeping up or isn't doing as well, is because it takes a while to kind of get to that kind of stuff. Wow, this is actually really interesting. I was not expecting the Rising Greedon to actually be first place, but they did. They were first place. And then we have the double Narukami. No surprise there. Narukami is still very oppressive. It will continue to be very oppressive, and it's still one of the best decks in the format. Even with trying to play around it, there's just some stuff that you just can't play around when it comes to Narukami, and it's just consistency. You can't play around consistency. This deck is just insanely consistent. There's just nothing you can do about that. And then we got Steam Mains as well. Steam Mains, again, the ride down just really helps against certain decks. Now, I will say Steam Mains to this sounds very painful. I don't know how much of the high... I haven't tested this deck too much. I don't know how much of a high roll this deck is. However, to me, it seems like this deck can kind of one-shot really fast, and the one-shot's probably where priority is, and one-shotting decks like these before they get a chance to do anything is kind of what you want to do, and that's probably what they did. They just went super ballistic and had a multiple restating Vanguard and just kept going. So that's just what the deck does. So very good stuff, very good stuff. So very, very interesting to see. I wasn't expecting this in first place. I was expecting like this in first place, but it, you know, can't win them all. Narukami can't win every single event. It can't always happen, but doesn't mean the deck is not toxic in any kind of way. I feel like this is definitely more degenerate going on than like what standard has happening right now. So let's go ahead and go over to, I think all we have left is V. So let's go find V New York. So this is what V New York looks like, which is pretty accurate. I actually think there's an update to this one specifically. Let me see. So the so it's like this. It was originally like the other guy, but it's actually a Vanquisher. So this is the top 8 VPremium New York, and this is honestly very accurate. In my opinion, right now VPremium looks where you have pretty much majority Steam Maidens, and then you have one or two other decks that can usually maybe kind of get through, right? One of those two decks being something like VANGUARD, maybe Orange, maybe Davos somewhere. I don't know, some kind of abyss of where Davos is decent, and then maybe something like Vanquisher, because Vanquisher draws a lot of cards. There's like those two. There's like one or two decks that can always kind of maybe have like a spotlight, but we're still back down to the same thing of Steam Mains just being the best deck. Regardless of that, VANGUARD's actually pretty decent into it if they go first, but they have to kind of go first. The minute they go second, the game is honestly in the Steam Mains' hand, unless they work like insanely hard, which can happen. So that's kind of, this meta we're seeing. We're gonna keep seeing this meta until either new cards drop or this gets banned. This will just keep happening. Like, yes, we've had a couple anomalies here and there where like, oh, we had like this one time where only 2 Steam Maidens tops and whatever, but it doesn't change the problem of what this deck is capable of. And it's very obvious. There's so many statistics now about what this deck is doing, and it's very obvious that this is clearly the outlier of like every other deck right now. The difference in like tops is so massive. The fact that Steam Maidens also takes majority of the top 4 slots is also pretty insane. It has the most top 4 results versus any other clan right now. I think this is like a huge problem. I really think this needs to be addressed. I actually wish this had already been addressed. I know in Japan this isn't really a thing right now, or in Japanese meta this isn't a thing right now, but they also still have full power Prism and full power Luard and a couple other things that just haven't really been touched. They still have Percival, if I'm not mistaken, to 1 as well. So they have other decks to play with to at least deal with this. We don't have that. All we have is just Luard. And I'm not saying bring everything back and, you know, we could just go back to having Prism at full power. But what I am saying is that, like, this meta will just keep happening until something changes. I'm not even going to be too surprised to see what the top 4 looks like. I expect to see 1 Luard and then a bunch of Steam Maidens. So let's go see what the top 4 looks like. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So again, 3 Steam Maidens just cracking it up, and then we had the 1 Luard player make it through, and yeah, that's just how it is. Like I said, Luard does not have a bad matchup into Steam Maidens. It's actually pretty decent. Luard will actually be pretty oppressive once Steam Maidens goes, because its only counter pick for the most part will be high roll decks and probably Anj. Once this meta drops, we're going to be seeing other problems kind of escalate as well. Mainly it will be Luard dominating again. I can't really see any other decks aside from like Lundy trying to counter pick into Luard, because, you know, they'll lose their front row and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty rough for Luard. However, you know, they still a big force marker generator. I think the fact that this deck can just generate 3 force markers a turn is just very oppressive, and all they have to do is high roll essentially and not like G-assist, and they're fine. But, you know, deck has its weaknesses. You know, riding the long Luard is a pretty big deal. Misriding Luard is a big deal. G-assisting is pretty rough, and going second is pretty rough, right? So, but that doesn't change the fact that it's showing results. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all our results. TLDR, I really hope, again, for the 20 billionth time, that we have seen the results now. And like I said, I'm not really one of those people that like seeing bans happen very often, but I really hope something changes with Steam mains. We haven't seen a ban list actually, which is kind of surprising because I feel like English V really needs one pretty badly, and I know they might be holding off on the BCSs to kind of end, and to be honest with you, that's pretty fair and understandable because they don't want to touch the meta until, you know, the BCS meta at least is over. But I really hope for something to shift before before the beginning of Worlds. I really hope that something happens there. And yeah, TLDR for premium and standard. Standard looks pretty healthy in my eyes right now. I know Youth Break hasn't officially dropped yet. It's dropping this week actually, but overall it feels pretty healthy, and I think even with Youth out, I think it'll still be a pretty healthy format for the most part. And then premium, I think there's a couple stuff that may need some touch-ups, but you know, the format isn't like in a terrible spot right now. It's better than V, which is saying a lot. So we'll see. But anyway, guys, peace out. That's done. You'll see you guys in a future video of whatever it is I'm doing. Bye 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 guys. Bye guys. Bye 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 bye.